So if you're just joining us today, if today's your first day, I want to catch you up real quick and give you a little context for what we're doing because it's a little different than normal, but you could not have picked a better day to come, and I'll tell you why. What I'm going to try to do today is, in essence, pull the curtain back a little bit, talk about not all of what makes us unique, but a little part of it, a little part of our DNA as a church that I think makes us unique in some significant ways, that makes us who we are, not necessarily better than any other church, but just makes us who we are. And hopefully you'll walk out of here with nothing, if nothing else, and with some clarity about, oh, that's what they're about, and that's part of what they care about, and I hope it resonates with you. So for everybody, here's what I want to do as we start. I want to play a little word association game. You don't have to say anything out loud, but I just want you in your mind to kind of think things through, okay, and see how you would answer this. When I say the word church, what comes to your mind? When I say the word church, what comes to your mind? I don't know entirely what it is for you, but I know what it is for most people, and it may be different for you if you're a church person or been around for a while. But for most people, they think of a combination of things. Most people think, some think, well, physical location, you know, it's like that building and that building, and there's a church there and a church there, and so they think about all the buildings around. Or they think, well, that's a Sunday morning routine. That's something people do, or that's something I do on Sunday morning. I just kind of go to church. I've always done it. Check it off. Or some of us think back to when we were kids. You think back to when you were a kid and weekends at Grandma's house because that's the only time you went to church. She dragged your tail right to church whenever you were there, you know, and you kind of had that experience with Grandma, and then you didn't do it again until next time you were at her house. Unfortunately, for a lot of people, when you start talking about church or when you start talking about Christians in our current culture today, and I understand this. This is not a criticism. I get this, and there's some validity to it, but for a lot of people, they will start talking about words such as bad church experiences, boring, irrelevant church experiences. They'll start talking about people that they consider to be, have created a club for insiders, and those people think they're better than the rest of us. They'll talk about words like hypocritical and judgmental. They'll talk about words like, or phrases like, well, they're against everything. The people, those church people, they're against everything. And they'll start listing off all the things that those people are against. And I don't know if you've recognized this yet because it's a little slower in our region for us to see this. I always joke with my friends around the country that we just run 10 to 20 years behind the rest of the country on everything. So when they're seeing something happening over there, I'll be like, we'll see it in a decade. It's fine. I kind of love that about our little pocket here. But when you start talking to people around the country, let me tell you what's happening. Not only do people now hear church and think hypocrites, hear church and think judgmental, hear church and think, oh, they're against everything and they think they're better than the rest of us. Now they hear the word church and they think dangerous. That's a group of people who are dangerous. That's a group of people who we think what they believe and the things they teach and what they do, they're dangerous for our culture. Our culture, our society, there are a lot of people who think this now, would be better off if those churches, if those Christians weren't there. So for 13 years now, one of the goals that we've had is simply this. We wanted to change the way people view church. We wanted to change the way people view church, but it wasn't because we thought, oh, we've got some great idea and we can do this better than other people, so let's do that. It had nothing to do with that. What motivated us to do this was simply this. We wanted to change the way people view church because we thought the way people view church should be the way people viewed Jesus when he was here in the first century, and there was a big disconnect between the two. When you open up the accounts of Jesus' life, this is pretty fascinating. Even if you don't typically read the Bible, you owe it to yourself to pick one of those accounts, Matthew, Mark, Luke, John, it doesn't matter. Just pick one, and whether you believe it or not, just read about Jesus' life, because here's one of the things that is fascinating to me. People who were nothing like Jesus actually liked Jesus, and he liked them back. And when you talked about Jesus, the words that came to their mind, the words that were associated with him, are not the words that are associated with the church today. As a matter of fact, even though there was this huge difference, this huge gap, this huge disconnect between who Jesus was and his character and what he believed and what he valued, even though there was such a gap between that and these people who tended to be around Jesus the most, that didn't seem to bother either one of them. It didn't. And the reason it didn't seem to bother them and the reason these people continue to gravitate towards Jesus is because they knew, in spite of the gap, in spite of the differences, in spite of the disconnect, they were convinced he was for them. And you know this isn't new information. You will gravitate, we all do, you will gravitate towards people you know are for you. It doesn't matter if you agree with them on everything. It doesn't matter if they believe differently than you. If you know they believe in you, if you know they are for you, you can't help but gravitate towards them because we all want people in our lives who are for us. We all want people who believe in us. So for 13 years, this is what we've been trying to do. We've been reading the stories of Jesus' life, and we've said, okay, let's see if we can be for people as a church the way Jesus was for people. Let's see if at least with this little experiment, this little church we've got right here, let's see if we can align those two things so that people think about us the way they thought about Jesus. So today, I want to talk for just a few minutes about what that looks like and why it's so important, and then I want to talk about a new opportunity we have to do it. As I began to look at the different accounts of Jesus' life, I had a hard time, honestly, picking which story or which encounter I would use to show you how this looked in Jesus' life, because there are so many. But I ended up landing on one of my favorite examples of this, and it involves one of my favorite people in the New Testament, and I think it's obvious why this should be one of everyone's favorite people in the New Testament. It was one of Jesus' 12 disciples, but he was maybe the least likely of all of them, and we'll talk about that in a minute. But his name was Matthew, so who wouldn't like a guy named Matt? I don't know. Seems to me like that's pretty obvious. Now, here's the thing you got to understand, okay? And people today sometimes do this, but in first century Israel, the Jewish people, the names they would give their children, big deal, like really big deal. They would choose names that had very specific meanings. They would choose names for their children that either reflected who they hoped those children would grow up to become, or in some cases, they reflected who those children were. And you will find instances in the Gospels where a person is known by two different names because as they got older, their name would be changed to better reflect their character, to better reflect who they had become. That's how big of a deal it was. This happened a lot in Israel, and if you're a parent, you may have picked your kids' names based off a lot of different things. There's nothing wrong with that. But in the first century, the Jews would do it strictly off of this name means something to us, and this is who we want our child, or this is who our child is. So, I thought just to give you a little insight into Matthew before we read about him, I thought I would do a little research and I would let you know what Matthew's name meant in the first century. And I don't think you're going to find this surprising. In the first century to Jews, Matthew's name meant strikingly handsome and intelligent one. Why are you laughing? No, you don't know your Greek. You go study your Greek, I'm telling you. No, if you're laughing, but just think about this. All the evidence bears this out, that this is true. Think about all the Matthews you know. Matthew McConaughey, Matt Damon, Matt Perry, Matt Johnson. There are a lot of Matthews. I'm kidding. I made that up. Listen, here's the reality. Matthew's name did mean something, but I'm telling you, the reason I brought this up is what Matthew's name meant compared to the life that he was living, it was more ludicrous than this. What Matthew's name meant and the life he was living, there was a major, major disconnect between the two, and I'm going to explain it in just a minute. The name Matthew in first century Israel actually meant this. It meant gift of God. Gift of God. Now, can you imagine what it was like for my sister when I learned what this meant? Oh, man, I had fun all through the teenage years. It was like, no, don't yell at me. I'm a gift from God to you. You get to, anyway. Matthew, when you talk to a first century Jewish person, I'm telling you, when they pointed out this Matthew, and we'll see this more in a minute, but when they point out this Matthew, it would cause any first century Jew to just snicker and chuckle and sneer, because Matthew in their eyes was anything other than a gift from God. Matthew was a tax collector, which simply meant this. He had chosen to betray his own people. He was a traitor to his own Jewish people. He had agreed to work for the enemy, the oppressive regime of Rome, and to collect Roman taxes on Jews. You say, well, that's not terrible. Somebody had to do that. Okay, I get that, but it was worse. Because what Rome would tell tax collectors like Matthew was this. You get us all the taxes we want, and then whatever you can extort or bribe or force out of those Jews above what we need, you get to keep for yourself. And so Matthew was a kind of tax collector, a Jewish tax collector who was forcing Jewish people, his own people, to give taxes to Rome, but then to give extra above that he was pocketing and getting rich off extorting his own people. You can imagine how unpopular he was in first century Israel. So when a Jew started talking about Matthew the tax collector, they thought, oh my goodness, what you want to talk about a gap between his name and who he turned out to be? He is anything but a gift from God. And yet, as you're about to see, Jesus has an encounter, and we're going to read the first recorded encounter Jesus had with Matthew. Jesus has an encounter with this guy where he proves that gap is not too big for Jesus to cross. That gap is not too big for Jesus to be for Matthew in spite of who Matthew is. And nobody in Israel could believe it was true. So the story of when Jesus and Matthew first met is in a couple of the different accounts. But I thought, you know what? I want to read you Matthew's own account. He wrote one of the accounts of Jesus' life. And I thought, this would be cool to hear this in his own words about what happened. So here's what Matthew tells us took place at that first meeting between he and Jesus. As Jesus went on from there, he's traveling down the road, and there's a group of followers of his, and we don't know how many, but probably a fairly significant number who were following with him. As Jesus went on from there, he saw a man named Matthew sitting at the tax collector's booth, which immediately to all of these followers, here's what popped in their mind as they're walking along. Oh, there he is. He's caught right in the act. He's in the middle. It's a scene of the crime. Like, he is right there extorting people right now, and they notice Jesus pays attention to him and starts walking over to this guy's booth, and they're thinking, oh, thank goodness. We've been waiting for somebody to set this guy straight forever. Jesus is about to do it. Jesus is going to set this guy straight, and no doubt, imagine what you would think Jesus would say. You know what they thought he would say. They thought the first 4 words out of Jesus' mouth would be, hey, Matthew, guess what? Thou shalt not steal. Have you heard the 10 commandments? This is as obvious as it gets. You're in violation. What is your problem, buddy? You're a Jew. Why are you doing this? But that is not what Jesus says. As a matter of fact, what he says next stunned all the people who were watching this. Absolutely stunned them. And he just said 2 words. You got a picture that I don't think we can fully understand the drama of this moment. He walks over to this booth. He looks right at this guy who's stealing from all his Jewish people, who's the furthest thing from a gift from God. And he says, follow me. To which all the other people who are following him go, oh, no, what was that? What did he say? In the back, they're going, I don't think we heard him right. Yeah, you heard him right. He said, follow me. And they're going, no, we don't. No, Mama said, do not hang out with people like this. We're following you, Jesus. He can't follow you too. That means he's with us, and we don't want to be with him. It's like, are you kidding? If he's going to follow, I'm going to unfollow. Like, I don't want anything to do with Matthew. Let me block him right now. Jesus says, no, you don't get it. Hey, Matthew, come on. Follow me. Follow me. And Matthew is more stunned than anybody, and so he gets up, and he starts following. Meanwhile, all the other people following are murmuring. All the other people following are going, you got to be kidding me. Why in the world would he do that? Okay, he's chosen some unlikely people, but this is the worst. And then it gets worse. Matthew, apparently, as they're walking down the road, looks at Jesus and says, hey, Jesus, I don't know what you have planned for tonight. You probably have plans. You're kind of important. But if you don't have plans, I've got this party already planned at my house for tonight. And all my other tax collecting buddies are going to come over, and I'm kind of known for these parties. That's what I do with all this money I've gotten. And so I was wondering if you wanted to come, but you need to know this is not a church party. Like, this is not a potluck party. This is one of those parties you don't invite the pastor to because then it's just awkward. This is one of those parties. Like, Drake's going to be popping, Post Malone's going to be, it's going to be phenomenal. Okay, some of you knew who that was. That's great. The 8 o'clock, no clue who any of those people were. So I'm glad you're with me. By the 11, they'll just be like roaring. We were there last night. Well, that's the 11 crowd. Anyway, this is the kind of party Matthew's inviting him to. And again, all the followers are getting really uncomfortable going, oh, no, we're not supposed to go to parties like that. We're good religious people. We're good church people. And to their amazement and shock, Jesus says, Matthew, I'd love to show up at your party. Let's do it. And he shows up. And when he shows up, Matthew says this happens. While Jesus was having dinner at Matthew's house, many tax collectors and sinners came and ate with him and his disciples. And when the Pharisees saw this, they asked his disciples, why does your teacher eat with tax collectors and sinners? Now, sometimes we give the Pharisees maybe a harder way to go than we should, but let me explain the Pharisees to you in real simple terms. The Pharisees were a group of people who started out with a very good purpose. Their job was to pay careful attention to identify when the Messiah showed up for the Jewish people. It's a good purpose. The problem was the Pharisees did what all human beings do. Once the Pharisees became Pharisees and were set aside and got a little bit of power and they were seen as a little superior to everybody else religiously, then the Pharisees said, hey, we're going to raise the bar. We're going to make it harder for other people to become Pharisees, and we're going to separate ourselves. We're going to try to create as big of a gap and a distance between us and other people as we can so that we're way up here and they're way down here. Now, that's not just a religious thing. That happens. It's just human nature. It happens to everybody. Doctors do this. Dentists do this. You know, optometrists do this. You name it. I'm not picking on anybody. Anybody does this. Like the standards or the qualifications to get in 20 years ago are not the same they are today. They've been raised. Why? Because people got in. They were like, well, we shouldn't let anybody else in who knew as little as we knew when we got in. So let's raise the bar. This is just human nature. So we just keep raising the bar and raising the bar. That's what the Pharisees had done, to the point that they were so narcissistic, they were so self-centered, they were so arrogant, they were so judgmental. They bought into the fact that they were far superior morally to everyone else. They were far superior religiously, and they believed with all their heart that God loved them most, that they were God's favorites. And so Jesus shows up, and he begins to contradict what the Pharisees have always done. And it creates tension and turmoil. And so the Pharisees, the whole time Jesus was ministering, his 3 years, the Pharisees would have spies, in essence, who would just travel around, watch what he did, waiting to catch him doing something that they could accuse him of. And so they have some Pharisees who are following Jesus, and they're, I don't know how it worked, but I'm guessing they're outside the house, kind of peering in through the windows, going, oh, what in the world is he doing? So they look at Jesus' disciples because they don't want to challenge Jesus directly. They've done that before. It never turned out well. So they pull Peter and Andrew and James and John, those guys, aside, and they say, tell us, why in the world would your teacher sit down and eat with people like that? There's such a huge gap between those people and God. There's such a huge gap between those people and Jesus. Why in the world would he associate with those people? Because no respecting Jew did in that time. Well, Jesus overhears this question. And it is not a question of curiosity. It is a question of condemnation. And so he does what you probably have done at times. Somebody asked a question of someone else you know, and you said, no, I'm just going to step in and answer that one directly. So he does. Let's keep reading. On hearing this, Jesus said to these Pharisees, it is not the healthy who need a doctor, but the sick. Okay, we can't argue with that. And then he says this, but go and learn what this means. I desire mercy and not sacrifice. This was a shot right at the Pharisees because they were all about sacrifices in the temple. They went through all the routines and all the motions. They were extremely religious, but they missed the heart of it all. They had no love. They had no compassion. They had no mercy. They had no grace. They had no acceptance. And Jesus says, I just want you to know, I'm not interested in your sacrifices. I'm interested in your mercy. I'm interested in your heart. I'm interested in how you treat people. I'm interested in whether or not you are for people. And then he ends with this, for I have not come to call the righteous, because there actually aren't any. I've come for sinners. In other words, this was Jesus' way of saying, Pharisees, you have built your entire identity around what you're against, and more dangerously and more damaging, who you're against. When everybody thinks of you, Pharisees, they just think of you're against stuff. You're against stuff. You're the against stuff group. You're the moral police. Jesus says, I'm here for a different reason. My identity is built on who I'm for, not who I'm against. I want to be known for who I'm for, not who I'm against. And so I'm going to show it to you in every way I can show it to you, and I'm going to show it to them in every way I can show it to them, that I'm for people nobody else is for. I'm for these tax collectors and sinners nobody else wants anything to do with. The gap between me and them doesn't bother me at all. I'll cross it to show I'm for them. If you read the accounts of Jesus' life, you see he did this with all kinds of groups. He did it with women when in that culture, people were not for women and they didn't have the rights of men. And Jesus crossed that gap repeatedly and showed he was for women. He did it with those who were disabled. He did it with those who were poor. There's so many examples of where he crossed bridges or built bridges and crossed divides that nobody else would cross. Because he didn't want just religious people to know he was for them. He wanted all people to know that he was. So for 13 years, this is all we've done. We've tried to read the accounts of what Jesus did and then say, okay, what would it look like for us to try to align what Jesus did with what we're doing? What would it look like for us to send the same message to every person in our communities that Jesus would send if he were physically here? What would it look like to show them that we are for them? And we do not always get it right. And we have to make apologies sometimes because we drop the ball. But this is always our heart, and this is always what we as a church are trying to do. One of the ways that I've said it over the years is this, that for far too long the church has been known for what it's against. We want to be known for what we're for. This is what's driven us. And here's what's been interesting, and all of you, matter of fact, most of you don't have this perspective. It's not your fault. But very few people have been here the whole 13 years. But what those of us who have been able to see is over the 13 years, the better we've gotten at doing this, the better we've gotten at loving people the way Jesus would love people if he were here, the better we've gotten at doing what love would require us to do, because Jesus said, here's your one command. You go love one another the way I've loved you. The better we have gotten at that, the more people we've had the opportunity to impact, the more people we've had the opportunity to serve, the bigger difference we've been able to make in our communities. So 13 years ago, we started, if you've ever been to the Curris Center, the student center on campus, we started in the small ballroom up there on the 3rd floor, and that filled up pretty quick. And so we moved to the large ballroom, and that started to fill up, and we went to 2 services, and that started to fill up. So we opened it up and did the full grand ballroom, and then we had 1 kids' room, and that led to 2 kids' rooms, and then multiple kids' rooms till we were using every space in that entire building. And then in the start of 2017, we moved over here. And we've continued to have an opportunity to reach people, but I want you to understand why. It's because for 13 years there have been a group of people, and you're part of them. There have been a group of people who have said, you know what, we are committed to our communities knowing not what we're against, what we're for. We want our identity not to be wrapped up in who we're against. We want to be known for who we're for. And the better you have loved people the way Jesus loves people, the more people we've been able to impact, and the bigger difference we've been able to make in our communities. But the thing that you all don't have the perspective to know, that I just want you to understand this morning, is that did not happen without a price, and that did not happen without some significant sacrifice. I was talking to someone this morning who's been here from nearly the beginning, and she was talking about how emotional she was as she began to think about this, what we're talking about today. And I told her, I said, I was the same way. I started thinking back on all the people who have invested tens of thousands of hours into this community to show our community we're for them. And that's not an exaggeration. All the people who have not just served on Sunday, which is phenomenal, but all the people who have volunteered to serve in our communities in so many different ways with so many nonprofits. I'm telling you, I run into leaders of nonprofits in this community, and every time I do, almost without fail, they will say to me, thank you so much for all the people from Journey who are volunteering and helping us. And I nod my head and I say, aren't they amazing? And they say, yeah, they're phenomenal. They're some of the best volunteers we have. And then we get done with the conversation, and I look at my wife and I say, I have no clue who's volunteering over there, but I should find out. Because it's not, you haven't done it because I've stood up here on a stage and I've said, hey, the church is going to do a deal and we all need to show up. There's nothing wrong with that. You've done it because this is your heart. You've done it on your own. You just showed up at these places and said, this is who we want to be. We're here to be for you. We're here to make a difference in the community. The same thing has happened over 13 years with people sacrificially giving their money. Over the last 13 years, people in this church have invested hundreds of thousands of dollars, about $800,000 to be exact, back into this community and our communities around us. Why? For one reason. Because it's one thing to stand up here and say we're for people. It's another thing to show it to them by what we do with our time and what we do with our money. And you have been sacrificially generous, and there have been people for 13 years who've been extraordinarily generous. And what I want you to understand is no matter when you started coming to this church, whether today is your first day or you've been here for a few years, you need to know there are people who came before you who sacrificed their time and money. And it's why you showed up here. And it's why God has done or is doing what he's doing in your life. And it's why he's changed you the way he's changed you. That you are part of a story that stands on the shoulders and the sacrifices of a lot of people who came before us. And now we have a new opportunity as a church that I am incredibly excited about. And I'm going to tell you why in just a minute. But primarily, I'm excited about it because we have a chance, all of us who are part of this church now, to write our own chapter, to make our own sacrifices, and to impact our community in a way that's never been impacted before. to not just add to the impact of our community, but to multiply it exponentially. So let me give you a little backstory, and then I'll tell you about this opportunity. 2 years ago, we moved over here, January of 2017, and this guy right here sat in meetings with staff and sat in meetings with our board and said, hey, listen, the question that I got asked over and over was, okay, this is the largest facility in the community. How long are we going to be able to stay here? And I said, we'll be here at least 5 years, because there's so much room to grow and there's plenty of room for the kids, way more than what we've got right now. This will be at least a 5-year bridge before we have to do something different. And then we moved over here, and in the first 2 months we were here, our attendance grew by 40%. And that was all your fault. You invited people. What were you thinking? I don't know. So anyway, no, it was incredible. It caught us off guard. We didn't expect for it to jump that high. It caught us off guard. And it did not take long, a matter of a year or less, our kids' environments began to fill up. So we figured out a way to use more space and create more space, and then change some things, and it filled up again and again. So now we're going to 3 services, and thanks for making that adjustment with us, because we want to create more room. But we know it's not going to take long for it to fill up again. And we're using every available space we can use for our elementary and our preschool kids. Every safe, secure space we've got here, we're using for them. Every safe, secure space we have for middle schoolers, we're using it for them. If you don't have a middle schooler, we have a transit. Transit's our middle school environment. We have a transit environment where our middle schoolers are just absolutely loving it. They're having phenomenal conversations with their small group leaders about what's going on in their life, their process in faith and developing faith of their own. These are such personal conversations. I mean, it's just blows my mind when I hear. And it's growing so fast. And don't hold me to this number, because I'm doing this off the top of my head, but I think last year our middle school environment alone grew by like 45%. They are just doing an incredible job. They're in there right now during this service doing it. So we just continue to see this growth and growth and growth. So it only took about 2 months for all those people to come back to me and say, hey, smart guy, that's not going to last 5 years. I'm like, okay, you're right. So for the last 2 years, we've been processing, when it gets to that point, what does our next step need to be? And so I want to talk to you for just a minute, and I'm not going to give you a lot of details today, but I want to talk to you for just a minute about this new opportunity we have to be for our community. I have been asked for 13 years, more time than I can count, when's Journey going to have a building? And my answer has always been, when we can impact and reach more people with a building than without one. Because we don't really care about bricks and mortar. That doesn't matter. All that matters to us is life change. And whatever we have to do, and if we need a building as a tool to reach more people, that's what we'll do. Until then, we won't. As a matter of fact, I have been asked that so many times. If everybody who had asked me, I should have done this. If every time I got asked, I just said, hey, I'll answer it if you'll give me $1, we'd just pay for the thing today and be done. I mean, I'm telling you, it's been a lot. Well, we've gotten to the point that we feel like now is the time for us to build our own non-portable facility. But here's the catch, and here's what excites me. This facility is not going to be about us. What we want to do is we want to build a place for Calloway. Let me tell you what I mean by that. When we started talking 2 years ago, the way I felt, and it wasn't just me, our staff, our board, our volunteer leaders in this church, everybody I talked to, when we began to talk about this, none of us got very excited about putting a lot of money into a building just so we could meet on Sunday. I should back up. The people who set up and tear this down every week, they were excited about that. If they're in here, yeah, they're excited. They were pretty pumped, and I get that. But just from my point of view, I was like, okay, what I don't want to do is have to put a ton of money into a building that sits there for 6 days a week and doesn't do anything. And I don't want to put a ton of money into a building that then in any way hinders or prevents us from doing what we need to do to serve this community well and to give to this community. It can't change who we are. So we started talking, all these groups, we started talking about, well, what does God wants to do with this? And we prayed and we prayed and we prayed. And here's what we realized. We realized this isn't about us. We should have known that from the beginning. But we realized, oh, wait a minute, this isn't about us. God's not wanting us to do this for us. He's wanting us to do this for our community. So I started having conversations with city and county government leaders, with other city organization leaders, started having conversations with business leaders throughout our community, with nonprofit leaders throughout our community. And I began to talk to them about what some of the needs were in this community that were not being met. And one of the things that came up over and over and over again was that for years, and if you've been around here a long time, you know this, for years and years and years, this community has desperately needed and wanted some type of convention center space, and they haven't been able to do it. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to build a non-portable facility that is not just designed for us, but it's designed to function as a convention center and a meeting space for our community. And we're going to open this thing up for use all throughout the week by nonprofit organizations. They want to do fundraisers, come to our place and do it. By businesses who are trying to pull employees together. I can't tell you how many of our major employers in this county said to me, there's not a facility in this county big enough for us to pull all of our employees together. We'd love to do that. This will be a facility that can do that. I've talked to city and government, or county government leaders who've said, we could definitely utilize a facility like that. It's going to be used a lot. As a matter of fact, I talked to a county government leader this week who, to say she was doing somersaults would be an understatement. She said, do you know how long our community's needed one of these? And I said, yeah, that's why we're going to build it for you. So, she was just beside herself. University groups, on and on and on. There are a lot of good meeting spaces in this community. This is going to be something different. It'll be about 40 or 45,000 square feet, and it'll have multiple large gathering areas for meetings, and it'll have a lot of breakout rooms. So one of the things that we heard from the city was, hey, we've been trying to bring conferences into Murray, and we bid on them, but we don't have a space adequate that's designed for conferences, and so we lose out. And if we could bring these conferences in, what it would do for Murray and the economy would be incredible. Well, now they're going to have a place to do that. So we're going to build a place with them in mind. We're going to build a place with our community in mind so that all the people in our community know that we're for them, not just in what we show up and do in nonprofit organizations, but they're going to know because we're going to hold this facility with open hands and meet a huge need in our community. Now, the flip side of it is this. It's also, for the first time ever, going to give us space that is custom designed for what we're trying to do to lead people into a growing relationship with Jesus. If you have never served in our kids' environments, you won't appreciate this. But it will be the first time ever that we have preschoolers in their own rooms, with their own walls, where it's not so loud it sounds like a NASCAR race, okay? They're down there in one big room. They'll have 50, 60 preschoolers in one room with these little walls about this tall trying to separate everybody, and it is so loud. I don't know. They do such a phenomenal job teaching these kids, but if we could just give them their own space where the noise distraction is out of the way, they'll learn so much more about how God made them, God loves them, and Jesus wants to be their friend forever. Same for elementary. We'll create a custom designed space for these elementary students for the first time ever, where they'll have the ability to do large group and storytelling with stage and all of that. They'll have that ability, and they'll have places to have small group conversations. And then we're going to have custom design space for middle schoolers and high schoolers. Our middle schoolers, if you don't have a middle schooler, you don't realize this. If you do have a middle schooler, I just want to pause and say thank you, because none of you ever complained to us about this. You are so incredible. But we dress it up and try to make it look nice, but it's like putting lipstick on a pig. Our middle schoolers are sitting in a loading dock back here that's concrete. It is a concrete box. That's what they're sitting in. Top, bottom, sides, it's concrete. That's all you can see. They're having these incredible conversations as small groups with their small group leaders, but they're trying to do it sitting in the middle of a concrete dock. And they'll have their own spaces and their own rooms to be able to do things, middle schoolers and high schoolers. And then obviously we'll have custom designed spaces for college students and all of us adults. It will be a game changer for us in terms of our ability to do what we are called to do as a church. So, I'm not going to give you a lot of details about it right now. And here's why. I didn't want to take up everybody's time on Sunday morning. What we're going to do instead is this. I want to invite all of you to attend one of 5 vision nights we're going to be having over the next 10 days. When you walked in today, you got a card that looks like this, and it's got all 5 dates. We're going to have one Monday night, Tuesday night, Wednesday night, Thursday night, and next Tuesday night. It's going to be 1 hour. I promise we will start on time, and we will get you out on time. And here's why I'm having these. because I wanted you to be able to come in some smaller gatherings. I'm going to give you all the details of everything related to the land and the building. Some of you are going, well, don't you have to have land to do that? Yes, and I have some phenomenal news for you. This past Monday, we signed a contract on 20 acres of land. Yeah, absolutely. I don't have time. We've been looking for land for 2 years. I don't have time to tell you the story right now, but I'm going to tell it to you at Vision Night. It is, and I don't throw this word out a lot. You know that. I very rarely do. It is a legitimate, only God could have done that story of how we got this land. After looking for 2 years, in 11 days, we discovered some land and had it under contract. I'll tell you about all that, but I will let you know this. Here's the thing we love about it. We had to be careful about where we put it or where we bought land because we want this location to serve the community, not just us. So it had to be, in a certain place near hotels and things. This land is 3 minutes from right here, 3 minutes from campus, and 3 minutes from the hotels on this end of town. It is a phenomenal location. So I'll tell you all the details about that at Vision Night. What I would love for you to do, though, is to choose to come to one of these. Just mark this, and when you leave, there are going to be guest services people at the doors. Just drop this in the bucket. We'll send you an email with the details, but we're going to meet right here in the CFSB Center on the first level, on the CFSB Center. In the Murray Room, we are in the CFSB Center. In the Murray Room on the first level down there. And the reason I wanted to do this is because I'm going to answer any questions you have. I'll stay there as long as you want to stay there to answer questions. I'll tell you all the details, and I'll tell you what this looks like financially, okay? Now, a couple things real quick about it. Number one, I just want to put everybody at ease. The number one question that I have been asked by people who've helped plan this, and I had the same concern and question. The number one thing is, hey, we can't do this and it change who we are. We can't do this and it keeps us from continuing to invest in the community. I will make you a guarantee. It will in no way change our investment in the community. It's going to multiply it. We will not change who we are and who we're for as we do this, because a building for us is not a finish line. It's not even anything that we're like, oh, we finally made it. It's just another tool for us to lead people into a growing relationship with Jesus and to show people that God is for them. So this is more of a starting point for us than it is a finish line. So you don't have to worry about that. I'll give you my promise. That will not change. Now, a lot of things will change, but that's not a big deal because we always change, don't we? Something's always changing around here, so things are going to change whether we stay here or move. So, of course, things are going to change, but not in a bad way, in a very good way. So if you'll just fill this out and then drop it in a bucket, I would love for you to come to a Vision Night. The other thing I'll do there is I'll talk to you about all the financial questions you have. Well, how much will it cost? Well, what's it going to take? Well, when's it going to get done? I'll show you where the land is. I'll tell you all of that. But I'll answer your financial questions. I'll give you one little tidbit right now, and I'm not asking for any money. I'm not guilting anybody to give, so you can relax. Here's one little tidbit. We need to raise a minimum of $1.2 million in the next 2 years in order to make this happen. And when I say to make it happen, in order to make it happen in such a way that it doesn't impact our generosity to this community at all, and it doesn't impact our mission at all. And we're not going to let that happen. So we need to raise $1.2 million over the next 2 years, which I'm just telling you from my seat. Made me swallow really hard. Like, that's a lot of money. So here's what I did over the last few months. First, I went to our staff, and we talked as a staff and said, okay, we never ask people in our church to do anything that we're not going to lead the way and do ourselves. If we don't believe in it, we're never going to ask you to do it. So there are 5 households in our staff, and I said, hey, I want y'all to pray with your spouses, and let's go ahead and decide over the next 2 years what we're willing to give above what we already give. And the 5 households that comprise our staff have committed over the next 2 years, in addition to the regular giving, to give another $132,000 towards this. That is over 10% of that 1.2. Now, I tell you that, one, because I want you to know, I think you know this, but I want you to know, if we're not willing to put skin in the game, we'll never ask you to do it. Jen and I are making the largest gift we've ever made by 3 times. It is a courageous step of faith for us. So our whole staff is being that generous. That's just phenomenal. I also went and talked to a few other leaders, volunteer leaders, and core people who are engaged here at our church, not near all of them. But I went to a handful, 22 other households to be exact, that said, hey, we'll go ahead and tell you in advance how much we're willing to do. And when you take those 22 households with the 5 households of the staff, here's the amazing news. Those 27 households have already committed to give $508,400 towards this facility. Yeah. You ought to clap. That's $500,000 you don't have to give. You better find them and thank them, right? That's extraordinary. Now, let me tell you what's most extraordinary about it. Those 27 households represent less than 5% of all the households who attend our church regularly. Let that sink in. Less than 5% of the households who attend here have committed $500,000. Here's what I'm going to ask you to do. I'm so glad you're excited about this. I want you to be excited about it, and we'll talk more about that excitement in a minute. But excitement will not make this happen. Participation will. So I want your excitement and your participation. I want the other 95% of you to participate in some way in making this happen. I do not care how much you end up giving. I don't. Here's my concern, and I've been saying this to everybody over the last few months. I want you to take a courageous step of faith that's going to cost you something. I want you to pray about it and figure out what is God wanting me to do, how is He wanting me to participate, and then just participate. And here's why. Not so we can get this done. God will take care of figuring out a way to get it done. I want you to participate because, as I talked about a couple weeks ago, at the end of this 2-year period, I'm just telling you, I've been down this road before with God doing stuff here. At the end of this 2-year period, we are going to have an extraordinary story to tell as a church, not of what we did, but of what God has done through us and for this community. But I want you to get to the end of the next 2 years. And I don't want you just to tell the story of what God's done in our church. I want you to have an experience to share personally. And I want your faith to be more alive than it's ever been before. And if you sit on the sideline and don't participate, you're going to have a story to tell, and you're going to be excited, but you will not have a personal experience to share. Please don't miss that. That's why it's between you and God as to how you participate. I don't care. But I want to see you participate for your sake. So I'll answer all the questions about how you can do that at Vision Night. Just fill that out. Come to Vision Night. Let's talk about it. I have been asking our staff and our leaders for over a year now and our leaders for several months now to pray a very bold, audacious prayer. I've been asking them to pray it way before I knew this number. And it was nuts, and it's still nuts. But what I've been asking them to pray is that somehow we would be able to do this debt-free. And the reason I asked that's not because I thought, I think we can easily give that much money. The reason I've asked everybody to pray that is because if we do this debt-free, every dime that we would have to pay in interest now goes right back into our community. And we're able to make an even bigger impact faster. And when I saw this number and I realized 5% of our households, less than 5%, had pledged $500,000, I thought, you know what? If everybody participates, God might just do that miracle, and it would be a miracle. So I hope you'll participate along with us. The other thing I want to tell you real quick, on a day like today, I don't want anything from you. I want something for you. So when you leave today, you're going to get a couple of things. You're going to get a 4 Calloway t-shirt. You're going to get inside your 4 Calloway t-shirt package, you're going to get a free car cling you can put on your back, a 4 Calloway car cling, and you're going to get a little booklet like this that tells you a little bit more about the vision behind how we're building this facility for Calloway. Real quick on the car cling, let me speak to those of you who live in Marshall, who live in Graves, who live in other counties, and those of you who are diehard Murray Tigers, and anything that says Callaway on your car makes you puke. Let me talk to you for just a minute. We designed this, because I hear it every time. I get it. But we designed this for you so that all you have to do is take a pair of scissors before you put this on your car and just cut that Callaway right off, okay? And just stick the 4 on your car. It will serve the same purpose. The reason we're giving you a t-shirt and this car cling, and we hope you'll put on your car, is this. This is going to create some extraordinary conversation, okay? We want, when people ask you, I see 4 Callaway around, or I've seen that 4th deal, what's that about? We just want to create an easy opportunity for you to say, you know what? Our church believes for far too long the church has been known for what's against. Our church wants to be known for what we're for. So we're doing things in our community to show you that we're for you and to show you that God's for you. That's all you have to say. It's that simple. But that's why we're giving you this. So take advantage of the opportunities. Take advantage of when people ask questions about the facility, and there's going to be a lot of buzz around it. If you've come to a vision night, I've given you all the info you need to be able to answer those questions. But we're going to help people understand we're not doing this for us. We're doing this for you. We're doing this to show you that God's for you. So, a couple things real quick. One, for those of you who are not followers of Jesus or you're not church people, I hope what you understand today is we don't want anything from you. We really do want something for you. And the reason we want something for you is because for those of us who follow Jesus, we have experienced His grace and forgiveness and mercy and love and unconditional acceptance, and it has changed our world. And we just want you to be able to taste that and experience it for yourself. And you may not believe in Him, and that's okay. You may not believe in Jesus or know what you believe in, that's okay. You may have had bad church experiences, and I get that. But I just want you to know, we want to do everything we can, and we're going to do everything we can, including building a facility to serve you all through the week, because we are for you and care about you that much. For those of you who are part of this church, I want you to understand today, you're part of something way bigger than you. You're part of a story that began long before you. And you are sitting here today because there were a group of people who came before you and sacrificially gave and sacrificially served to create this place for you. And now you have an opportunity, and I have an opportunity to pick up a pen and to write our next chapter in the story and to create a place for the next generation and the next wave of people who are going to come. Watch this. You may not realize it, but you're part of a story. Welcome to the journey. My name is Matt Johnson. You know how glad and excited we are to see you guys here. It's a story that began with a group of people who came before us and dreamed of creating a different kind of church, the kind of church people not in church would love to experience. When they started in a ballroom, they had a little money and no experience, but they were willing to trust God and take a step. What they couldn't imagine is what God would do next. Their dream inspired more people to demonstrate big faith, and the movement grew as more and more people sacrificed, served, loved, led, and generously gave their time and money. And now our communities are better for it. Today we stand on their shoulders as we write our next chapter in the story. It'll also be a chapter that requires big faith and sacrificial giving from us. It will be a chapter of serving and loving our communities in ways greater than they've experienced before. In this next chapter, we'll continue to create environments people not in church love to experience. We'll create places where anyone can know and experience a God who loves them no matter who they are or what they've done. Places where the next generation will know that we are for them and we believe in them. And we'll continue to create places where people experience the grace of Jesus for themselves. This next chapter will require us to take bold steps of faith, and it will require us to trust God to do what only He can do. But it'll be worth it because of the legacy we leave in our communities. It'll be worth it because of the lives that are changed. This is a story of a church loving their community, and you are part of that story and movement. It's bigger than you, and it'll live on far beyond you, so pick up your pen, write your next chapter of faith, and together, let's follow Jesus and create a place for Calloway. Do you guys see what you've done to my hair over the years? Man, y'all have been hard on me. Listen, here's all I want you to do. Give us an hour of your time. Sign up for a vision night. And come and hear the details about how you can participate and how we are going to serve our community with this facility. Because for far too long, the church has been known for what's against. We want to be known for what we're for. So let's build a place. Let's create a place. Let's make an impact, and let's leave a legacy for Calloway. Let me pray for us. Father, we are so grateful. I'm so thankful that you would trust us and entrust to us this extraordinary opportunity. We do not deserve it. Thanks for giving us this chance to show people in our community you're for them in a way that they've never seen before, and with a kind of generosity that is so extravagant and sacrificial that it will get the attention of everyone in our community. And we can simply point to you and say, we're just doing this because God's for you. And this is the kind of generosity He's demonstrated towards you. Help us to be great stewards of this opportunity. And at the end of these next 2 years, my prayer is that every single person who's a part of this church will not just have a story to tell, they'll have a personal experience to share as they participated and took a courageous step of faith. And it is in Jesus' name we pray. Amen.